Magnolia Heights is a luxurious apartment complex in the city center, known for its modern design, well-kept grounds, and upscale amenities like a rooftop pool, concierge service, and gym. It's a vibrant community where affluent residents enjoy comfort and convenience in their daily lives. Among its longtime residents was Marcus Carter, a 32-year-old black man who had called Magnolia Heights home for the past 5 years. Marcus was an accomplished architect, known for designing several prominent buildings in the city. Despite his successes, he valued humility and rarely flaunted his achievements. To him, Magnolia Heights was more than just a place to live. It was a sanctuary from the demands of his busy professional life. His neighbors knew him as friendly and approachable, though he often kept to himself. That Saturday evening, Marcus returned from a routine grocery trip, carrying a few bags of fresh produce and snacks for the week. Dressed casually in gray joggers, a hoodie, and sneakers, he exuded an air of relaxation. His day had been uneventful, and he was looking forward to spending the evening unwinding in his apartment, watching the latest episodes of his favorite series. Meanwhile, Victoria Simmons, a recent addition to the building, was sipping coffee in the lobby lounge. In her early 40s, Victoria had moved in just a month ago, drawn by Magnolia Heights' exclusivity. She projected an air of self-importance, priding herself on being vigilant about her surroundings. Her sharp eyes often darted around the lobby, scrutinizing anyone who caught her attention. When Marcus entered the lobby, Victoria immediately noticed him. Her gaze lingered, her expression shifting from curiosity to suspicion. To her, Marcus's casual attire and relaxed demeanor seemed out of place in the upscale building. She had no knowledge of who he was, nor did she bother to inquire. Instead, her mind raced with assumptions, fueled by prejudices she had likely carried with her for years. Marcus barely noticed her as he moved toward the elevator, focused on balancing his grocery bags. But Victoria's discomfort grew. The sight of Marcus made her uneasy, though he'd done nothing to warrant her suspicion. For her, it was an instinct, one that often led her to assume the worst about people who didn't fit her narrow image of what belonged. It was this unease, rooted in her biases, that set the stage for a confrontation Marcus never saw coming. Marcus Carter entered the lobby of Magnolia Heights with his usual quiet confidence. The groceries in his arms shifted slightly as he reached for his key fob, his thoughts already on the relaxing evening ahead. The warmth of the well-lit lobby, the polished marble floors, and the soft hum of life around him offered a comforting familiarity. But to one person in the room, his presence triggered something entirely different. Victoria Simmons, seated on one of the plush chairs near the concierge desk, spotted Marcus the moment he walked in. Her brows furrowed as she took in his casual attire, gray joggers, a hoodie, and sneakers. To her, Marcus didn't fit the image of what she believed a resident of this prestigious building should look like. She had no real reason to question him, but her discomfort grew with every step he took toward the elevator. "Excuse me," Victoria called out, her voice sharp and commanding. Marcus paused, looking up with mild confusion. He glanced around, wondering if she was speaking to someone else. When her eyes locked on his, he realized she meant him. "Yes?" he said, his tone polite but guarded. Victoria rose from her seat, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. "Do you live here?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Yes, I do. Can I help you with something?" "I've never seen you before," she said, her tone laced with suspicion. "You don't look like someone who lives here. Are you visiting someone?" Marcus exhaled, already sensing where this was headed. "No, I live here," he repeated, holding up his key fob as proof. "Have a good evening." He turned back toward the elevator, hoping to end the interaction quickly. But Victoria wasn't satisfied. She stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Wait a minute," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I don't think you belong here. What apartment are you in?" Marcus's patience began to wane. "Ma'am, I don't have to answer that. I live here. Now, if you'll excuse me." Victoria cut him off, her voice growing louder. "You can't just walk in here like you own the place. I'm calling security." Marcus shook his head, trying to remain calm. "You're making a mistake. I've lived here for 5 years. I'm just trying to get to my apartment." Victoria pulled out her phone, ignoring him entirely as she dialed the number for building security. "Yes, this is Victoria Simmons," she said into the phone. "There's a man in the lobby, black, mid-30s, acting suspicious. I think he might be a trespasser or a drug dealer. Can you send someone right away?" The accusation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He stood frozen for a moment, disbelief washing over him. "A drug dealer? Are you serious?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with anger. Victoria ignored him, snapping her phone shut and standing her ground. "Stay right there," she demanded. "Security will handle this." "I'm not staying anywhere," Marcus said, his composure slipping. "I'm going to my apartment." He tried to step around her, but she moved to block him again. The few residents who were in the lobby began to take notice, their curious glances turning into concerned whispers. A couple of people pulled out their phones, recording the escalating situation. "You don't get to just walk away," Victoria shouted. "People like you think you can just do whatever you want, but not here. Not in this building." "People like me?" Marcus said, his voice now firm. "What's that supposed to mean?" Victoria didn't answer directly, but her body language and expression said it all. To her, Marcus didn't belong. His presence in the building challenged her preconceived notions of who was acceptable in a place like Magnolia Heights. Marcus tried again to move past her, but this time, Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a small canister of pepper spray. "Don't take another step," she yelled, her hand trembling but her resolve unwavering. "If you try anything, I'll defend myself." "You have got to be kidding me," Marcus said, backing up slightly and raising his hands. "This is harassment. Put that away before you hurt someone." But Victoria wasn't listening. Her mind was consumed by fear and prejudice, painting Marcus as a threat that didn't exist. Without any provocation, she aimed the pepper spray at him and pressed down on the nozzle. The burning liquid hit Marcus's face, and he stumbled back, dropping his groceries. Pain surged through his eyes and skin as he tried to wipe the spray away, his vision blurring. Gasps filled the lobby as the few onlookers watched in shock, their phones capturing every moment. "What are you doing?" one resident shouted at Victoria. "You can't just attack him like that." But Victoria stood firm, clutching the pepper spray like a weapon. "I'm protecting this building," she declared. Someone had to take action. Marcus crouched on the floor, his face buried in his hands as he tried to alleviate the burning. "You've got it all wrong," he said through gritted teeth. "I live here. I belong here." At that moment, the elevator doors opened, and the building's security guard, Daniel Ramirez, stepped out. His expression turned to alarm as he took in the scene. The groceries scattered across the floor, Marcus crouched in pain, and Victoria standing defiantly with the pepper spray. "What's going on here?" Daniel demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Victoria turned to him, her face flushed with self-righteousness. "Thank God you're here. This man was trying to break in. I stopped him." Daniel frowned, looking at Marcus. Recognition dawned immediately. "That's Mr. Carter," he said, his voice firm. "He's a resident." The color drained from Victoria's face, but she quickly regained her composure. "He didn't look like he belonged," she stammered. "I was just trying to keep everyone safe." Daniel's eyes narrowed as he stepped toward her. "Miss Simmons, you just assaulted one of our residents. Do you realize what you've done?" Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Daniel's stern glare silenced her. "This is unacceptable," he said, turning to Marcus. "Mr. Carter, are you okay?" Marcus nodded weakly, though his face still burned from the spray. "I'll be fine," he said, his voice hoarse. But this is far from over. The lobby of Magnolia Heights buzzed with tension as Daniel Ramirez, the building's seasoned security guard, assessed the chaotic scene before him. Groceries were scattered on the floor, Marcus Carter was crouched in pain, wiping at his burning eyes, and Victoria Simmons stood nearby clutching her pepper spray like a shield. The air was thick with disbelief and murmurs from the gathering crowd of residents, some of whom were recording the incident on their phones. "What's going on here?" Daniel demanded, his voice firm as he stepped between Marcus and Victoria. Victoria turned to him, her face flushed with self-righteous anger. "Thank God you're here. This man was trying to break into the building. I stopped him before he could do anything dangerous." Daniel's brow furrowed as he looked at Marcus, his sharp eyes instantly recognizing the resident he'd greeted countless times over the years. "That's Mr. Carter," Daniel said, his voice edged with disbelief. "He's lived here for years." "He's a long-term resident." The color drained from Victoria's face, but she quickly masked her unease with a defensive tone. "I've never seen him before. He didn't look like he belonged. How was I supposed to know?" Daniel's jaw tightened as he stared at her, his frustration evident. "Miss Simmons, just because you don't know someone doesn't mean they don't belong. And using pepper spray on someone without any real cause? That's assault." Marcus slowly stood, his hand still shielding his stinging eyes. "I've told her a dozen times that I live here," he said, his voice raw with pain and frustration. "She didn't care. She made up her mind the moment she saw me." Victoria crossed her arms, still refusing to admit fault. "I was protecting the building. You can't be too careful these days." "Too careful?" Daniel snapped. "You didn't even stop to ask questions. You just assumed the worst because of how he looks. That's not protecting anyone. That's profiling." The gathering crowd murmured in agreement, their expressions ranging from shock to anger. A few residents who knew Marcus spoke up, their voices firm in his defense. "He's my neighbor," one man said. "I've lived here 2 years, and he's always been friendly and respectful." "You've made a huge mistake," another woman chimed in, shaking her head at Victoria. "This is disgusting. You didn't even give him a chance." Victoria's grip on the pepper spray faltered as the weight of their words began to sink in. Still, she doubled down, her voice rising with desperation. "I was only trying to help. You all would be thanking me if he had been a threat." Daniel stepped forward, his gaze steady and unyielding. "There was no threat. Mr. Carter is a resident. You, on the other hand, just turned a normal evening into a disaster." Turning to Marcus, Daniel softened his tone. "Mr. Carter, let me help you. Do you need medical attention?" Marcus shook his head, though his eyes were red and watery. "I'll be fine, Daniel. But this," he gestured toward Victoria, "this isn't something I'm letting slide." "You shouldn't," Daniel agreed. "This behavior has no place here, or anywhere." Pulling out his phone, Daniel called the police, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. As he hung up, he turned to Victoria. "The authorities will sort this out. In the meantime, I suggest you step back and think about what you've done." Victoria's indignation flared. "You're calling the police on me? For doing the right thing?" Daniel's expression hardened. "The right thing would have been to ask questions, to show some decency. Instead, you jumped to conclusions and attacked a man who did nothing wrong. That's not justice. That's prejudice." As they waited for the police to arrive, Daniel escorted Marcus to a nearby chair, offering him a bottle of water and a damp cloth to soothe his face. Marcus accepted gratefully, his frustration palpable. "Daniel, I appreciate you stepping in," Marcus said quietly, his voice still raw. "But this shouldn't have happened in the first place. I shouldn't have to justify my presence in my own home." "You're absolutely right," Daniel replied, his voice filled with regret. "I'm sorry this happened to you. We'll make sure it's handled properly." The tension in the room remained thick as Victoria stood off to the side, her arms crossed tightly, glaring at the onlookers who murmured disapprovingly about her actions. Her earlier confidence had given way to visible discomfort as the reality of the situation began to sink in. When the elevator doors opened again, revealing the responding officers, the lobby fell silent. All eyes turned toward the police as they stepped into the room, their expressions serious. Daniel greeted them and began explaining the situation, providing a clear and unbiased account of what had transpired. Victoria's defensive stance wavered as the officers turned their attention to her. She could sense the shift in the room, the collective judgment of the crowd now bearing down on her. Yet, she still refused to acknowledge her wrongdoing, stubbornly clinging to the idea that she had been in the right. As Daniel finished recounting the events, he gestured toward the residents who had witnessed the confrontation. "There are plenty of people here who can back up what happened, and we have security cameras that recorded the entire incident." The officers nodded, taking notes and preparing to address both Marcus and Victoria. The room remained tense, the weight of the situation palpable as accountability loomed on the horizon. The elevator doors slid open, and two police officers stepped into the tense Magnolia Heights lobby. Officer Teresa Hill, a seasoned professional known for her no-nonsense approach, led the way. Her partner, Officer Daniel Price, followed closely, scanning the scene with a practiced eye. The scattered groceries, Marcus sitting with a damp cloth pressed to his reddened face, and Victoria clutching her pepper spray painted a clear picture that something had gone terribly wrong. Officer Hill approached the building's security guard, Daniel Ramirez, who stepped forward to greet her. "Officer, we've had an incident," Daniel began, his tone measured but urgent. "This man here, Marcus Carter, is a long-term resident. Ms. Simmons," he gestured toward Victoria, "assaulted him with pepper spray after accusing him of not belonging in the building. Multiple witnesses confirm her actions were unprovoked." Officer Hill nodded, her sharp gaze shifting to Marcus. "Mr. Carter, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Marcus looked up, his eyes still red and watery. "I'll be fine," he said, his voice calm but strained. "But this was completely uncalled for. She attacked me for no reason. I live here." Officer Price stepped over to Victoria, who stood rigidly, her arms crossed and her expression defiant. "Ma'am," he began, his tone even, "we're going to need your version of events. Can you explain what happened?" Victoria straightened, her voice trembling slightly but still firm. "I saw him walking into the lobby, and he looked suspicious. I've never seen him before, and he wasn't dressed like someone who belongs here. I was just trying to protect the building." Officer Price raised an eyebrow. "So you assumed he didn't belong because you hadn't seen him before? And your response was to use pepper spray?" Victoria nodded, defensive. "He wouldn't tell me where he lived, and when I tried to stop him, he got aggressive. I had to defend myself." Officer Hill, now standing between them, turned to the witnesses gathered nearby. "Did anyone see Mr. Carter act aggressively toward Miss Simmons?" she asked. Several residents immediately spoke up, their voices clear and firm. "No," one woman said. "He was calm the entire time. She was the one yelling and escalating things." Another resident chimed in, holding up her phone. "I recorded everything. He didn't do anything wrong. She just attacked him." Officer Hill glanced at the phone, her lips tightening. She turned to Victoria, her tone growing sharper. "Ma'am, based on witness accounts and video evidence, it appears you attacked Mr. Carter without provocation. That's assault." Victoria's face flushed, her confidence faltering. "I was just trying to keep the building safe," she protested. "I didn't mean any harm." Officer Hill didn't waver. "Intent doesn't change the fact that your actions were illegal. Using pepper spray on someone who posed no threat is a crime." Turning to Marcus, Officer Hill asked, "Mr. Carter, would you like to press charges?" Marcus hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, I would. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." With that, Officer Hill informed Victoria that she was under arrest for assault and disturbing the peace. Victoria's protests grew louder as Officer Price handcuffed her, but the crowd's murmurs of approval drowned out her words. As Victoria was led toward the elevator, Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted but resolute. He had done nothing wrong, and now, justice was finally being served. The lobby of Magnolia Heights was abuzz with murmurs as Victoria Simmons was led away in handcuffs by Officer Price. Her protests echoed faintly as the elevator doors closed, silencing her indignant cries. The gathered residents began to disperse, their expressions ranging from shock to quiet satisfaction that justice was being served. Marcus Carter remained seated, a damp cloth still pressed against his reddened face. While relieved that the ordeal was over, he couldn't shake the sting, both physical and emotional, of what had just transpired. Officer Teresa Hill approached Marcus again, her voice soft but professional. "Mr. Carter, we're going to document everything thoroughly. We'll need your full statement and any medical reports if your eyes don't improve. The video evidence and witness accounts strongly support your case." Marcus nodded, his voice steady despite the lingering pain. "Thank you, officer. I'll cooperate fully. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure this kind of thing stops happening. One of the witnesses, a neighbor named Eleanor, approached Marcus. She was an older woman who had lived in the building for years. "Marcus, I'm so sorry you had to go through that," she said, her voice heavy with empathy. "If you need anything, testimony, support, you can count on me." "Thank you, Eleanor," Marcus replied, managing a small, appreciative smile. "It means a lot." Meanwhile, a local media crew arrived outside the building. They had initially been scheduled to meet with Marcus for an interview about his architectural work, but word of the incident had reached them. Sensing the gravity of the story, they shifted focus, setting up their equipment to cover what had transpired. The crew's producer, Karen Holt, entered the lobby and approached Marcus cautiously. "Mr. Carter, we heard what happened," she began. "We were supposed to meet for your interview, but I think this is a much more important story to tell. If you're comfortable, we'd like to share your experience." Marcus hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing on him. After a brief pause, he nodded. "Yes," he said firmly. "This isn't just about me. It's about how we deal with prejudice and assumptions. People need to see how harmful this kind of behavior is." Karen nodded in understanding and signaled her team to prepare. "We'll make sure your story is told honestly and respectfully." The following day, the building's management team held an emergency meeting. The incident had sparked outrage among residents, many of whom demanded accountability and changes to ensure no one else endured what Marcus had. The property manager, Linda Wallace, released a statement apologizing to Marcus and vowing to implement new policies. "We deeply regret the events that occurred yesterday," Linda's statement read. "Magnolia Heights is committed to fostering an inclusive, respectful community. Moving forward, we will require all residents to attend diversity and sensitivity training. Additionally, security protocols will be updated to prevent incidents like this from happening again." Management also reviewed the building's rules, ensuring clearer guidelines for handling conflicts and emphasizing that no resident should take enforcement into their own hands. Signs promoting inclusion and respect were installed in common areas, underscoring the building's commitment to these values. Over the next week, the incident gained widespread attention. News outlets picked up the story, and social media discussions erupted around the themes of racial profiling and civilian misuse of authority. Marcus, while reluctant to be thrust into the spotlight, saw an opportunity to effect change. He participated in interviews, sharing his perspective and emphasizing the broader implications of what had happened. "This isn't just about me," Marcus said in one televised segment. "It's about challenging the assumptions we make about people based on their appearance. It's about accountability and ensuring no one feels unsafe in their own home." His calm demeanor and thoughtful insights resonated with viewers, sparking meaningful conversations about prejudice and implicit bias. For Victoria Simmons, the fallout was swift and unforgiving. After her arrest, she faced charges of assault and disturbing the peace. Public opinion turned sharply against her as videos of the incident circulated online, accompanied by scathing commentary about her actions. Many criticized her for jumping to conclusions and using violence without cause. Management at Magnolia Heights also took decisive action. Citing violations of community standards and her role in creating a hostile environment, they terminated her lease, giving her 30 days to vacate the premises. Victoria's attempts to justify her actions fell flat, both legally and socially. The incident served as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked prejudice and the importance of accountability. Despite the ordeal, Marcus remained optimistic. He worked closely with the building's management to help implement meaningful changes, including organizing workshops on implicit bias and fostering a more inclusive community culture. 1 month after the incident, Marcus reflected on what had happened. While the experience had been painful, it had also sparked progress, not just for him, but for the Magnolia Heights community and beyond. As he walked through the building's now vibrant and welcoming lobby, he felt a renewed sense of hope. Change was possible, and he was determined to be a part of it. The incident at Magnolia Heights became a powerful case study in the consequences of racial prejudice, the importance of accountability, and the potential for growth within a community. Each moment of the ordeal highlighted key themes and lessons that resonated far beyond the building's walls. 1. The harm of racial profiling. Victoria's actions underscored the damage caused by making assumptions based on race and appearance. Her prejudice turned a routine moment into a traumatic experience for Marcus, showing how deeply ingrained biases can lead to harmful and unjust outcomes. 2. Accountability as a catalyst for change. Marcus's decision to press charges and speak out was pivotal. It emphasized that discriminatory behavior must be confronted and addressed directly. Without accountability, harmful patterns are likely to persist. 3. The importance of leadership and policy. The swift response from building management, including implementing diversity training and updating security protocols, illustrated the role institutions play in fostering a culture of respect and inclusion. By setting clear expectations and holding individuals accountable, they created a safer, more welcoming environment for all residents. 4. The power of resilience and advocacy. Despite being the target of unjust treatment, Marcus's calm demeanor and willingness to share his story turned a painful experience into an opportunity for education and progress. His advocacy inspired meaningful conversations about bias and respect. 5. A community's role in unity. The support from neighbors and witnesses demonstrated the strength of collective voices in confronting injustice. Their willingness to stand up for Marcus reinforced the idea that change is possible when individuals come together. Ultimately, the incident served as a reminder that every person deserves to live with dignity, and that even in moments of conflict, growth and understanding can emerge. In the weeks following the incident at Magnolia Heights, the building's atmosphere began to change. The lobby, once a place of quiet tension, now felt more welcoming and inclusive. Residents greeted one another more openly, a sense of solidarity growing as they reflected on what had happened. Marcus Carter, the man at the center of the event, had become a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for progress. For Marcus, the transformation of the community was a bittersweet victory. The ordeal had been deeply painful, a stark reminder of the biases he and so many others face daily. Yet, it also showed the potential for growth when people chose to confront prejudice head-on. Marcus took an active role in working with the building's management, helping shape the newly implemented policies on inclusivity and respect. Magnolia Heights introduced mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all residents, staff, and even visitors. Signs were placed prominently around the building, reinforcing a commitment to treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their background. These changes weren't just symbolic. They represented a genuine effort to ensure that the building would never again be a place where someone's identity could be used against them. The story also gained significant traction in the media, sparking discussions about racial profiling and its broader implications. Marcus used his newfound platform thoughtfully, participating in interviews and panel discussions where he shared his perspective. His words resonated deeply. "We can't control the assumptions people make, but we can control how we respond to them." Accountability and education are key to breaking the cycle of prejudice. Victoria Simmons, on the other hand, faced the full weight of her actions. In addition to legal repercussions, she became the subject of public scrutiny. Forced to leave Magnolia Heights and reckon with the fallout of her behavior, she faded from the community she had once sought to protect. A month after the incident, Marcus took a moment to reflect. As he walked through the lobby, greeted warmly by neighbors who now knew him by name, he felt a sense of closure. The path to progress was far from complete, but the steps taken at Magnolia Heights offered a glimpse of what was possible when individuals and communities committed to change. For Marcus, the future held hope, not just for himself, but for everyone striving for a more just and inclusive world.